Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bootstrap Founder. Today, I'm talking to Justin Jackson, the co-founder of Transistor FM. We talk about the problems with common entrepreneurial advice, bootstrapping a value-driven software business, and how open standards benefit indie founders in particular. Here's Justin. One thing that frustrates me a lot is how unreflected many things are in the community of entrepreneurs and indie hackers and founders. There are all these best practices that people rarely reflect on and really just jump onto and try to execute to out-execute the competition, whatever that might mean in that context. And it's super frustrating I was actually going to ask you this as a particular question because I wanted to see what you think about advice. And I feel there's a lot of advice out there and most of it is bad in a sense that it's not applicable, it's not pragmatic, and it's kind of has ulterior motives somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And I was wondering what your perspective is on this. Like, do we as people who have some experience in the field, do we have to seed the idea space out there to combat misinformation that is quite prevalent?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the human world is a world of ideas. And the way we share ideas is by talking about them, discussing them, writing them, podcasting about them, making videos about them. And I think ideas should be put forth, and then I think those ideas have to stand up to scrutiny. I think ideas need to be debated. I think ideas need to be tested, evaluated, all of those things. So I'm pro-idea. What concerns me sometimes is that some of these ideas are just so thin in that the way that they get memeified and generalized are devoid of any context, any nuance, any sort of exploration. And if you challenge them, you're seen as a pessimist. If you question people who are trumpeting them, you're seen as, a negative Nancy. That's the part that I think is unhealthy. Even ideas like charge more. Charge more is a good idea in a certain context, but you have to get deeper than just the meme version of that just gets spread around the world. It's like there's people are making stickers that say charge more, and nothing wrong with that. But as soon as it becomes a slogan and there's okay, but let's actually get into the weeds on that. Like, what does that mean to charge more? Even, all these people are raising prices right now. There's this general idea that in a recession, you want to raise prices. When there's inflation, you want to raise prices because everybody else is raising prices because theoretically your costs are going up. And I mean, I'm as big of a dummy as the next person, but I want to at least investigate that or have more of the smart people investigating these things and going, okay, but is this always true? And when would it maybe not be true? How do you test this out? And it has to go beyond, these blog posts, which are 3 months ago, we raised our prices and we increased MRR by 300%. Okay, well, report back in 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 36 months, 48 months. I want to see the whole trend. And we have a very short news cycle, even in the bootstrap, indie hacker, startup space. People publish a blog post, and again, I understand why it happens. These blog posts will often resonate, and then they'll get kind of embedded in people's understanding. But very few people are going, well, let's go back to that post where they wrote that they increased prices. Let's see what happened since then. Because you can increase prices and sure, you might increase your monthly recurring revenue short term. But then if we go back in 12 months and overall revenue is down, well, you can see there was a trade-off there. And maybe that trade-off is worth it and maybe it's not worth it.
It's probably something that people don't even report. right? They don't report that because
Oh, yeah.
you only share the interesting stuff, which is one of the biggest problems that I have with people attempting to build in public. Right?
Yes.
They go for the interesting blog posts
Yeah.
that are great and that are motivational.
Yes.
But the long-term consequences, the damages that these kind of things actually might do, they kind of pulled, like they just put out under the rug. Like that is a big problem.
Yeah, and again, because to me, I'm just interested in, and I have this idea that knowledge and our discovery of things that are true is generally ascendant, meaning the more we investigate, the more we test, the more we rigorously evaluate ideas and concepts, the more knowledge we have, and this knowledge is ascendant, meaning we keep climbing up these stairs towards a greater understanding of truth. And we can't get there unless we can apply that rigor to everything, to go, okay, well, is this really true? And when is it true? In what context is it true? Was it just true for this person? Could it also be true for me? How would I evaluate that? How would I evaluate the trade-offs? How would I evaluate the risks? And it becomes more complicated quite quickly. I think that there is potential even for, I mean, we even saw this a little bit back in the early kind of SaaS days when you had Salesforce come out, and then fairly soon after you had Basecamp and then Ruby on Rails, and then there was this explosion of interest in building SaaS and Ruby on Rails in particular. And if you look at that first, see, a lot of people don't even remember this or know about this, but if you were around for it, there was this kind of gigantic movement of people launching Rails-based SaaS apps. And maybe at the time we lost some of the dissemination of information was lost on some of those folks. And, you know, many of them did not succeed. Many of them lost a lot of money. Many of them struggled for years and years and years and then had to throw in the towel. And that's always going to be a part of business. But my hope is that we could, if anyone's thinking about starting a business, we could at least help them see the landscape as clearly as possible. And what helps with that is just the rigor. It helps to rigorously kind of process and evaluate ideas as a community. So yeah, advice, sure. I mean, I think if you've been around for a while and you've had some success and you've had some failures, there are certain situations which are kind of clear to anybody with experience where it's like, okay, this idea you have just does not seem to have enough traction, and it's maybe, you know, you could maybe point to people where it could be. Maybe there's not enough demand in this market. Maybe it has to do with your product. It's not good enough or not stable enough or not polished enough. Maybe it's just the competition is that much better. So I think we can give advice. But what I don't really like is this kind of slogan, 1 word, 2 words, 1 sentence advice that then just gets trumpeted around like a cult or a religion or something. And, you know, move fast and break things and all these other things. It's like, these are just silly statements that don't actually have any reasonable meaning. Meaning, if you apply them, you could have, like, move fast and break things, you could apply in a million different ways with a million different results. It's not repeatable in the sense that you go, okay, well, I'm just going to move fast and break things, whatever that means, and then I'm going to get a Facebook style result. Like,
yeah, obviously,
of course, it doesn't work that way. But oddly, I see people acting and believing in that way, and so I advice is fine. I think building in public is fine, but every founder at the end of the day it probably just comes down to founders. They have to ask those hard questions and struggle and research, contemplate, ask for help. Most of the good advice is being given in back channels, unfortunately, just because real good advice requires context. And, there's a lot of context I just don't want to give publicly about my business and my life. And I only share that with people I trust in the kind of back channel, the Telegram groups and the Slack DMs and the Twitter DMs and all those things. So
that's the key. I think that is 100% the key. Like applicable advice cannot be applicable without the context for A, in which it is given and by whom it is given, and to whom it is given and for what, right? Like, do you have these both kind of sides? And on the side of the person giving it, it's always anecdotal, obviously, because that's kind of where it comes from. So, you have to translate it into something meaningful anyway. And that's where you start like evaluating it and try to figure out, is the person doing this because they want to help me, or are they doing it for another reason? Like there are so many things, just even from the transmission standpoint between sender of the message and recipient of the message when it comes to advice. I very much agree that trust is at the core of advice to begin with. And what I love, what you just brought out here, is like the kind of Twitterification, quotification of advice. And I think like move fast and break things is a great example, because to me, that's not a description of anything you could ever do, because it's so general and it's so unspecific. But it's a rallying cry for a kind of person that wants to, do something in a specific way.
Yes.
That's all it is, right? Like,
and
can't be more specific than that.
And the same thing applies to charge more. Charge more than what? Charge more than when? Charge more today and
what?
Tomorrow? Repeatable forever? Like next week? It's
I love it.
It's not. There's no foundation. There's no like for a culture that seemingly loves like mathematics and logic and programming and all these things. Like I suck at math, but let's at least get what are the variables here? Charge more, when, how, what are the starting variables? What are the ending variables? How do these things increase? When does it stop? Like, give me some context here. And
it reminds me of another thing you recently talked about, like when you talk about starting and ending variables, and that's the kind of like visitor to trial conversion thing, right? Which is also something people hyper optimize for, like with all kinds of cheap tricks and growth hacks, things that I detest because they're short-term gains over long-term perspective, right? And that's really, really bad if you choose the short-term stuff. But what do you think about that? Like, I know that you put less emphasis on that now than you used to, which is interesting because I would like to know why that happened and how that happened.
Well, there's always been these general rules of thumb that have been shared in the community, and I think they're generally pretty good. So trial to paid conversion, credit card up front, visitor to trial, people say around 1%, trial to paid with credit card up front between 40 and 60%. And then there's a different, like no credit card up front. People say generally 5% plus visitor to trial to paid 8% to 20%, depending on, what you're doing. Now, here's the problem. It's pretty easy to quantify with reasonable accuracy your trials and how many people converted to paid. Those numbers are almost always accurate. Because, in Stripe these days, we get, okay, well, this is a trial, and then we could see them convert. Oh, that's a conversion, right? Those numbers, pretty solid. What's not solid and what is incredibly muddy is visitor. Because this became most acute for me when I was working for a startup in Portland, and I had to report on KPIs all the time. And one of the KPIs was visitor, number of visitors. I put that in, number of trials, and then it would auto-calculate visitor to trial. And, based on whatever I was typing into those boxes in Excel, my boss was either happy or not happy. And then one day I was like digging through Mixpanel or Google Analytics or something. And I'm like, look at all these visits. Like, these just look not real. and then I'm looking at it, and I just found all these garbage visits that were being treated by Google Analytics and Mixpanel as legitimate visits, but weren't. And then sure enough, a month later, Google finally comes around to tagging those as bots or spam or whatever. And so all those numbers I'd spent months inputting have zero meaning. Now, if month to month or week to week or day to day, you can put a number in your spreadsheet one day and then wake up the next morning and Google says, you know what? We said you had 10,000 unique visitors, but it turns out that 3,000 of those were not legitimate visitors. Well, that changes your numbers substantially. So all of a sudden, my conversion rates look way better. How am I to know? And there's no reasonable baseline because I might have months with very little spam visits, but then the next month I might have lots. But at the same time, the next month I might have legitimate visitors increase. It's just very, very muddy. And people treat this kind of attribution like it's like rock solid. And I've been doing product marketing now in SaaS since 2008. And those attribution numbers, I've never seen attribution numbers, like visitor numbers especially, that I was like, those are rock solid. I can trust those 100%, because you just don't know. Your Samsung refrigerator could be pinging your website for all you know. Like, it's completely possible. So, and we deal with this in podcast hosting all the time. And, there's tons of smart people. And in podcasting, it's even more, you'd think it would be elevated in the sense that a download is what is monetizable for people who are selling ads, but it's a moving target. It's like everybody, no matter who they are, whether it's Spotify, whether it's us, whether it's the biggest publishing places, the biggest trackers, they're all modifying their filters and their numbers all the time. So for me, it's like the only numbers I really look at for Transistor these days are number of trials and number of conversions. And we have a Slack bot now that Jason built that just shows us number of daily paid signups. And these days, if we're in the double digits for daily paid signups, we're pretty happy. And if it's a slow day, we're like, we keep an eye on it, but, and even those numbers have seasonal variations and COVID variations and, economic variations depending on recessions and things like that. So I don't know how you can have somewhat of a baseline, and the more you've done it, you get this kind of third sense for, okay, this is kind of what it feels like. Oh yeah, every year in December, things kind of slow down. And then for us, January, people kind of wake up 2 weeks into January and want to start a podcast. So you get kind of a sense of when you might be in trouble. But yeah, I think visitor to trial is just, I haven't seen it being super helpful. Maybe as an overall trend, you can kind of see like, okay, this looks good. And, but even then, like I don't know. I guess if you saw a bunch of traffic converting from Reddit and you were like, okay, well, that was an interesting, referrer. But for me, it's like trials. And then I just ask every trial when they sign up, how'd you hear about us? So they're self-reporting right when they sign up how they heard about us. And I find that more helpful than trying to get a computer to accurately attribute a visitor and where they're coming from and all that stuff.
It does remind me a lot of what people are currently trying to do with ChatGPT, like with these kind of AI systems, where they're trying to fake things in a way that aren't even detectable. And I'm always thinking about like any system that is monetized on a certain particular metric, either page views or even listens on a podcast where sponsors pay per amount of downloads or something like that. People will try to game that. People will always try to outfake the system in a way that gives them bigger numbers. And anything that you then try to track or analyze will have these things in there, right? Like it's just unavoidable. People are trying to circumvent any kind of system in their favor.
Yeah, exactly. The old trick in podcasting used to be you would, if you posted a direct link to the MP3 on Twitter, it would get thousands of downloads. And it would help bump up your numbers for when you talk to sponsors. And there were tons of people doing this thing. And, you know, and the most recent one was people were putting in video games, you know, that my kids have to play, and they have these horrid ads you got to watch through, and they were putting podcast listens in there. So you got to listen to 30 seconds of this podcast in order to keep playing the game. And these were IAB certified downloads for a podcast. IAB is the advertising bureau that is supposed to track all these things. So these are legitimate downloads, but it's just some 10-year-old going, I just want to get back to this game. Okay, I'll listen to this thing, and it downloading. For me, always, the simpler, the better. And I mean, I've tried all sorts of complex, like marketing, tracking, and everything. And about a year into Transistor, I just ripped it all out. And now we use Fathom for like basic page views on our website. Okay, what's our most popular page? It's our pricing page. Okay, good to know that. Is traffic traffic's basically pretty steady. Okay, that's great to know. Where are people finding us? Oh, here's the refers. Good to know. And then I just track in Stripe how many trials we have, what's our trial to paid conversion, and how many paid customers we have, and what MRR is. And for podcasting, I always like looking at the response rate, which is just a completely made up metric that you can't really report on in a graph. But it's when I release an episode, how many people do I hear from? How many people reach out, try to find me some way, you know, and this is after they're driving to work, listening to the podcast. Like a lot of people are listening to your show right now. And if we've said anything that like kind of hits them and they're like, oh, I got to email Arvid about that when I get home. And then they just think about it. And then they actually get home. So they say hi to their wife and kids. And then they actually go to their laptop and type you an email. That response rate matters. That's the most important metric. Did you move people enough that they were willing to go, okay, as soon as I get, hey Siri, remind me to, I just put on Siri, remind me to talk to Arvid when I get home about that episode because it made me mad, or it made me think that he's totally right and this is why. And, those are the responses that I love, are people, responding. And the other thing is those responses sometimes come, they don't all come all at once. Like we still have people signing up for Transistor who say, hey, I listened to like this one episode of Build Your SaaS right when you were starting, and it just had such a profound impact on me. I filed it away. Yesterday, my boss asked if, we should sign up for a podcast hosting platform. And I said, oh, we got to use Transistor. But it's been 2 years since he listened to the episode, right? So these responses don't come all at once either. It's like almost antithetical to the way marketers like evaluating campaigns. It's like, well, if it's not within this 30-day window, it doesn't matter. It's like, well, but humans don't operate on a 30-day window. Humans operate on a much different timeline. And if we're trying to fit everything into these rigid, attribution windows or whatever, you're missing out on how most humans make decisions, buy things, get moved, are influenced. That's not how we work, And it's easier to just simplify it, ask customers why they signed up, and keep it simple. You don't need all that extra machinery and if anything, it's just not going to give you the right information. You're just going to be, driving this bus based on maps or a GPS that's not actually taking you anywhere interesting. Just simple stuff, just simple touchstones along the way. We don't need, to make it too complicated.
Yeah, and I think that your business that you've built, it doesn't, at least from the outside, doesn't look too complicated either. Right? Solving a very specific problem for a very specific kind of people. I think you've done a really good job with this. A great job, even, if I may say so myself, being
Thank
a
you.
customer of your fine establishment.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like you've been doing this for 5 years now, right? Like it's been almost over 5 years, I think. It's been a while.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, we signed our partnership docs in, we decided to work together January 2018, and I think we'd signed everything by February 2018. So, and it's 2023 now, right? Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, it's been an incredible journey, and especially to reflect back on that time where, we wanted to build something together, and we had some hunches about the podcast market. Mm-hmm. We had a pretty good idea that we would be good partners, but you never know. And we just feel so much gratitude that, folks like you have come along and decided to become customers and use the product and enjoy the product. And it's been incredible. I think the things we did in those first few months were interesting because we kind of talked a lot about our values and what we wanted out of the company. What is this company for? Now, a product is for customers to use and enjoy and get value out of. A company is for the founders and the employees families and the community in which they exist. And we thought a lot about the product. We wanted to we want to build the best podcast hosting and analytics on the planet, offer the best customer support, have really insightful features, really intuitive UIs, all those things. But what's the company for? Well, the company is to give us, the stakeholders, a good life. Founders, employees, families, and then the community. And I think you can do that work and still not have a successful company because so much of it depends on these other variables. Having a market that is hungry for a particular product, and then building a product that can outshine the competition and attract customers. So it's not a guaranteed way to build a company, but if those other things fall into place, it really is a great way to build a company that serves the stakeholders, that gives the stakeholders a better life. And having built many different kinds of companies, from retail shops, like we had 2 snowboard shops in my early 20s, to, I've sold ebooks, I've been in consulting, I've worked for startups. Often businesses kind of own the founder. They are running the founder and running the founder ragged. Like they're just founders, too many founders, I think, and too many business owners are just on this treadmill that's not very fun and really grinds them down and burns them out eventually. And being able to put these pillars in place, these values and these questions we ask before we build anything, really helped ground us in like, okay, this company is going to build us a better life. So when things came along, like we had one story is, it was just John and I at the time. We're the only 2 people in the company, and we get a call from, it must be a Fortune 10 company. It's one of the biggest companies in the world. And he is interested in our private podcasting feature. Already folks in his organization are using Transistor. He noticed he's in the C-level suite at that company, and now he wants to negotiate a bigger deal. So he asks to book a call. He books a call with me, and we're talking, and he's like, "Wow, like you've got 15 of our accounts already using you. I want to bring you 5,000. All of our divisions. We're going to bring them all here. I love your product. He said, I spent all day reviewing reviews of Transistor Online. You're consistently recommended in the top 3. I logged into the product. I looked at it. It's amazing. Your team has executed at the highest level. This is great. And he says, you know what? After this call, let's get your legal team to talk to my legal team, and then we'll get your trust and safety folks to talk to my trust and safety folks. And I was like, whoa. I said,
it's just you.
I said, this company is just 2 people. And he literally paused for 30 seconds. He was like, it was like he lost his breath. Mm-hmm. He's like, what? I said, yeah, it's just John and I running this. And I can tell you, if you need all of that, I know, because we have these values. Like, I don't want that. I don't want to hire a sales team. I don't want to have, like I said, in order for me to do business with you, I'm going to have to hire 3 lawyers full time. I'm going to have to hire like an accounting department. We have none of that. We're 2 people, and we just love the life we have. It's calm. It's not like, even though it was just 2 of us, we could run things in this manageable way. The pace of life was good. I said, before I got on this call, I was snowboarding an hour ago, and he was just like reeling from all of this. It was just like, he could not believe it. And so he's like, so you don't want these 5,000 extra customers? I said, no, not if it's going to take all that. So he paused again, and he said, well, what if we bought you? And I said, man, I just know we don't want to work for you. We just don't want to work for you. We built ourselves a great business and a great life, and we're good. And he just couldn't believe it. He was just like, okay, I guess the call's done, But it was those values, those questions, those pillars we'd put in place about what was important to us. And instead of like responding to, oh, of course, like if somebody comes to you with 5,000 accounts, of course, like just ratchet up your whole company to be able to serve that enterprise customer, because that's going to be, tons of more revenue. And of course, if a bigger company says they want to buy you, you should take it seriously. Like that's what you're supposed to do. And we were just like, maybe it's because we were older when we started Transistor, but it's like, well, if I go work for this company, and I mean, John really felt it because this was his first kind of independent, company on his own. And he's like, why would I give this up? Like, I have all this flexibility and all this freedom. I'm having more fun than I've ever had in my life. We're serving great customers. We're not going to be billionaires, but we're doing well here. Like, we would rather enjoy this for as long as it lasts than, trade it for something we actually don't want, which is the freedom, the life, the good life, Yeah. So
that's the kind of choice you can make as a bootstrapper, though, right? Like that's what, if there's no other interest in how big your company should grow and how much money you should make, right? Well, then you can make those choices. And
again, this is why I have changed my opinion on funding a bit, because it was hard that first year. And I think getting someone else to risk their money so that you can try out an idea can be a good idea, especially, some of these other like Tiny Seed and Calm Fund, I think seem like reasonable approaches to funding. But you really see, especially in a recession, you see all of the, not unintended consequences, but the consequences of funding. And we're seeing, in the podcast industry especially, we're seeing lots of companies publish reports that they've run out of runway and they're firing people. All the major podcast companies, Spotify and Art19, and they're either freezing hires or they're laying people off. And runway is it's a foreign concept for John and I, because
It's infinite.
we each invested 5,000, which was mostly just for the contract. And then our runway was, well, John's going to keep working his day job. I'm going to keep doing all the other business stuff I was doing. And we're going to just keep growing this until we can go full time. And it's when we could go full time, the runway it's infinite as long as churn doesn't exceed revenue, right? Yeah. And so it's interesting. I think this is why sometimes advice is difficult, because advice is given in a moment. It only takes a minute to tell somebody what to do. But the repercussions of decisions and values take a lot longer to play out. And I think we're seeing some of that play out right now. Folks that were hiring up with runway, which is we've got some money in the bank and now we're going to spend that hiring people, that if we don't get revenue high enough, we're going to have to let go. And that idea, again, maybe one day we'll have to do work like that, but I don't want to. I just want to run a small company, hire when we absolutely need to or want to, and hire out of revenue, meaning we've got enough money to pay this person. Even if revenue went down by 20%, we'd still be okay.
Do you find that Transistor, being a bootstrap company with those values in place, is more resilient to the recession that we're currently
I think
facing?
So. I think so. Because again, this is the thing. I can say all this stuff and then everybody can check in on me in 2 years and see what's happening. Because
we will.
It's true. I could, and I'm not, I want to be clear. I could be wrong. I could be making the wrong decisions. But first of all, we're trying to live within these values we set up. And we have these values that, for example, one of them is our physical, emotional, and mental health is more important than anything that's going on in the business. So if a contract is going to require me to take 3 red eyes in a month to sign things and meet with people, already I'm going to say no, because I just know that's going to destroy me. So living within your values, even if the decisions you make end up not working out, at least you lived within your values, you know? I do think it makes us more resilient, though, because we never had this idea of runway. We never had this idea of spending money we didn't have. And our margins we always try to have some left over. And at the end of the year, if we do have some left over, we do profit sharing with our employees. So, and I think we've been able to do that every single year, and every single year since we've hired people. We've decided not to raise prices right now because in our mind, it doesn't make sense for our customers. It's like, if we're in a recession and everything else is getting more costly and we're serving creatives and we're serving a lot of prosumers, so people who are trying to build a brand or an audience or build their profile or build a little side hustle, if we raise prices on them, you know, as a former kind of prosumer myself, I would just quit. Like I would just cancel. You know, as soon as Adobe, raised their prices on Photoshop and all that stuff, I was like, oh, Sketch is cheaper. I'll just use that. And so it doesn't make sense for our customers. We're deciding to add more value and keep our prices the same because I feel like our prices are fair and we're still growing. So why would we mess with any of that? It's just, and the other thing is our costs, because we're small, our costs have not gone up that much. Sure. We have costs. Our biggest costs are people, and server costs have gone up a little bit, and, you know, our email costs have gone up a little bit, but it's it's fractional compared to, it's not like I'm running a coffee shop and, the main thing I sell is coffee beans and like those have gone through the roof. We're doing fine. And so to punish customers by raising prices when where people are losing their jobs and prices are going up, it just didn't feel right. And we can run this for a long time. And our financial math is pretty simple. It's not like our books are super complicated. There's not a bunch of variables we're having to check all the time. Like, oh no, what do the investors think? And oh no, what's the board think? And oh boy, what about this? And it's just simple. It's like, okay, how much money did we have coming in? How much money is going out? And John and I meet a couple times a month and just go through our every transaction. Like literally every transaction in our business. We just not every customer transaction, but every Stripe deposit and then every expense. It's not that complicated. And again, anything could happen. We could lose this all tomorrow, but overall, I think it's making us more resilient. The reason I'm trumpeting this a bit is generally simple things are more resilient. If you have a well-built, simple chair with less joints and all those kinds of things, it's going to last longer. If everybody knows, like in the 80s and 90s growing up, every once in a while you get a friend who'd get a real fancy car, and like a big dashboard with like all these buttons and power windows and stuff. The fancier the car, the more stuff that can go wrong. Simple is more resilient. Like you'd get, my parents always bought manual transmissions because it was just it's just simple, no power windows, nothing extra. It was just like simple, and they just break down less. So I think these principles also kind of work themselves out in other spheres. The less complicated things are, the less variables, the less contingencies, the less, it's actually the problem with web development is there's so many dependencies in web development and there's so many things that can break. It's HTML on the web is pretty simple. That's why I love the web, but simple things are resilient,
Yeah. I guess there's a whole other layer too. Like the whole podcasting space is effectively built on open standards, which themselves are fairly simple protocols, right?
Yes.
RSS feeds where tools can pull episodes and meta information, HTML for the website that you create, and JavaScript for the widget that you use to embed a podcast episode into something else. Essentially, the industry you're in and the tool you're building, all of this is built on open standards, on something that is simple by design, supposedly, but at least simple because it's so well distributed and ubiquitous.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the open standards are certainly bring more, from a conceptual standpoint, they are a little bit more complicated to understand because people's frame of reference is the centralized standard. And I really experienced this with my daughter because she's 20 now, but when she was 18, she was writing this report for me, the Gen Z kind of report on podcasting.
That was a great one.
And she's like, when we had a phone call, and she's like, Dad, I don't get it. Like, why are you so down on like all these central players? Like, you seem to have a negative kind of feeling towards YouTube and Spotify. And what's wrong with Spotify? Spotify's cool. Spotify's great. If I go to Spotify, it recommends podcasts. Like, isn't that a good thing? And I said, well, you're going to need some centralization for sure. But here's what's great about the distributed nature of podcasting is we're still pretty early in Spotify's cycle, but we've already seen how it affected artists. So Jack Conte of Pomplamoose tells this great case study of he was selling MP3s on iTunes, and his band, it's a 2-person band, and they're making about $150,000 a year on the band. And this is enough money for them to make music, to produce it, to put it out in the world, for their fans to buy it. And they're full-time on the band. They're making a combined $150,000, and, life is good. And then streaming comes along, and it literally destroyed like 95% of that. And he's still selling the same thing. He's still selling music, but it was the centralization that ended up hurting him because everyone decided, oh, I'm going to get my music through, the majority of people decided, I'm going to get my music through Spotify. And they just didn't have any other channels to reach their fans. There was no open, and he went on to create Patreon to kind of create an alternative funding model. What open standards like RSS give creators is optionality. So for sure, I think a lot of creators should be on YouTube because YouTube is a giant platform. It's a giant search engine. There's so many people watching and consuming video there. It's a great way to get your message out. But for sure, I don't want to rely on it. I don't want to have all my eggs in the YouTube basket because the story is always the same. Facebook convinces all these local businesses to build Facebook pages, get everybody to like their Facebook page. You know, you go to a shop and they've got a little sticker that says, like us on Facebook. They're they're giving up their email lists to go all on Facebook and just have Facebook likes. And then a couple years later, Facebook goes, now to reach your audience, you've got to pay for boosts. It's the same cycle. The entire structure of their economic model depends on it. You're eventually going to get taken advantage of. Guaranteed, by the way. So right now, there's some YouTubers that are killing it, that love YouTube. Eventually, YouTube's going to do something that they don't like, or they're going to get demonetized, or they're going to get kicked off, or they're going to have an ad that they don't agree with, or whatever it is. Or YouTube's going to change the algorithm. YouTube's going to say, you know what? We're going to move away from creator-based algorithms, and we're just going to go to algorithms like TikTok. And TikTok doesn't care who the video is from. The TikTok is just going to show the most viral content of that moment, which makes it harder for creators to build an audience. This is where it's going, for sure. Open standards, RSS, email, the web, these standards, they're messier, but because they're distributed, for sure, like Spotify and Apple would love to own podcasting, but they can't. They're in this battle where there's tension between them. You know, Apple's got 30%, Spotify's got 30%, YouTube's probably got another 20% or 30% or 40%, but they're all in this locked battle of, well, no one's going to own it. And as long as nobody owns it, creators own it. We have our RSS feeds. We can host them ourselves. We can forward them to a different hosting platform if we want. We can lock them down, but keep all of our subscribers. We can remove it from Spotify if we don't agree with their business practices. It gives us optionality. We can put ads in there. We can use bad language on there if we want. It gives us the freedom to do what we want and what we need. And it allows us to keep our audience. As long as people are subscribed to that RSS feed, no matter where you go, they can go with you.
Yeah. The only thing we pay with is discoverability.
Yes.
Right? That's always been one of the biggest issues in podcasting to begin with, but also like people self-hosting their video. Nobody's going to watch it if they don't know where to find it. And the same goes for podcasts.
Yeah, and this is what's strange to me is that we had this whole decentralization. It was almost like a cartoon decentralization movement with blockchain. It was like all of these people were discovering decentralization for the first time. The web has been decentralized before there was a web. Like Usenet groups, FidoNet on BBSs, all decentralized. DNS, decentralized. So the thing that runs all of the domain names in the world is decentralized. It's just a bunch of every server has a list of, all the domains and then where they point to. And it's distributed around the world. It's amazing it even works, right? And somehow in that system, and again, what here's the surprising part to me is whenever I point to these older systems like DNS for discoverability, DNS, I'm blanking, torrent trackers, there was Usenet for sure, FidoNet for sure. These were old systems. Some of them were built 3 or 4 or 5 decades ago. And it's like we just stopped that discovery and that curiosity. And then blockchain came along, and then it just owned the conversation about decentralization. And even they weren't really focused on discoverability. And that's why you got all these centralized exchanges and centralized NFT marketplaces. It's like, if you're going to have an imagination about decentralization, if you're going to put the smartest people in tech on a problem, why are we not doing any work on decentralized discoverability? And a lot of people say, well, it's impossible. And I'm like, well, it feels like we have not been curious enough about it. And to me, it's not impossible because we had these rudimentary systems working. And even if someone just decided to help improve DNS, right? So right now, DNS takes, a couple hours to update, usually sometimes longer, 24 hours. Well, why have we not gotten curious as a tech community about how we can improve that? And then those same kind of tech could be used for discoverability other way. And in some ways, this whole movement to Mastodon is interesting to me because you have this decentralized model and, again, limited discoverability, but it's there. Like, I can search for your username even if you're on a different server, and it finds it pretty quick. So we just need to augment some of these existing models. And to me, that's a way more interesting question than saying, let's continue to build up, let's just find the next YouTube and the next Google and the next Spotify. I know venture capitalists love that. And maybe that's why we haven't gotten decentralized discoverability, because venture capitalists will not fund it.
Well, they want to fund it, but they want to fund one thing. And the problem with decentralized discoverability is that it has to be federated. Mm. And if something is federated, it has to be a connection between different entities that is willingly maintained, right? Yes. It's like, what do you say with Mastodon? You have all these servers and they have to federate with each other. That means that each server has to accept all these other servers as like agents of truth. Yeah. And if you want to do that, if you want to fund that, well, now you have to fund 1,000 people with 1,000 different servers. It's probably an incentive alignment problem, because DNS probably the same thing. Like the companies or the non-profits that run these servers, they have very little incentive to make it any better, because, what's in it for them? It's being used as it is. I think you're absolutely right. There's a problem there, but the problem might just as well be that trust, again, it kind of harkens back to what we said earlier, right? Everything is built on trust. Same here.
And the curiosity of just independent geeks.
Yeah, I guess.
If you think about...
They've been snatched away by the Facebooks of the world, right? That's a bit of a problem. They're pulled into these centralized companies as well.
Yes.
They have very little incentive to do any thinking about decentralized systems if the system they work for is a centralized one.
Yes. And I hope, this is why I've always held on to these ideals from the early web. I grew up I turned 10 in 1990 and grew up visiting BBSs. And that whole system, it was this beautiful system of people building some open source stuff, but then also stuff that you shareware that you would pay for. And each enabled the other in this nice, it wasn't perfect. I've got a little bit of rose-colored memory here, but
good days.
But there was something nice about it. And if you look at the bootstrapped companies that have succeeded, MailChimp, ConvertKit, a lot of email companies, a lot of podcast hosting companies, that the top, Buzzsprout, Transistor, Captivate, Castos, we're all independent companies. We're not big public companies. A lot of and even look at Basecamp, built on open source and the open web, right? HTML, CSS, TCP, IP, all of the protocols. These old crusty open protocols have enabled so much commerce. Independent commerce. It's like the bootstrap companies. Why do the bootstrap companies gravitate to these kind of open, even like Tailwind? Tailwind is open source software, open source framework, And it's an incredible independent business. Maybe one of the most profitable independent businesses ever created. You know, it's incredible. Taylor's done the same thing with Laravel. Open source, open protocols, they generate opportunities for indie hackers, for bootstrappers, for solopreneurs. And this is why I think the geek community, or, you know, the tech community, this is why we need to be rallying for improvements and innovation in open standards. And we're doing this in podcasting right now. We formed a podcast standards project, similar to what Zeldman did with the Web Standards Project back in it was probably in the 90s or whatever. Like, they were petitioning these big companies, Microsoft, convincing Microsoft to adopt open web standards. We all benefited from that. And you know who else benefited from that? Basecamp. And Microsoft, yeah. But Basecamp benefited from the fact that you could visit basecamp.com and sign up and use it in Internet Explorer, Firefox, whatever. So I hope that we haven't had some of these movements in a while, you know, and we got really distracted by crypto and NFTs. It was like, it had all of the energy of like building the open web again, but it was just not useful in a way that has shown itself. And I hope now that, you know, crypto's kind of down right now, I hope that we can take some of that energy and bring it back to these things that actually give us value now. It's very likely your next business is going to be a boring web app built on boring old open protocols. TCP/IP, DNS, HTML, CSS. It's all old and boring, and we should be innovating on top of it.
Wow. I could not agree more. Like, honestly, the idea of open protocols to me has always said nobody can take the market away from me, because the protocol will always be there, right?
Yeah.
That's the kind of anti-Peter Thiel sentiment here. You cannot become a monopoly in this market. Like, Tailwind couldn't become a monopoly because somebody else could build something different for different people and exist just as well. Nobody can buy the IP rights for TCP/IP.
Yes.
That does not exist. That cannot happen. So great advice.
And today, I'm sure if Microsoft could have owned any of that, they would have. They would love to.
Would have tried.
And again,
absolutely.
This is what's funny to me. Sorry, I did one more tangent. Is I often get called, people say, Justin, you're too cynical and pessimistic about whatever, Elon Musk, crypto, venture capital, all these things. I want to critique people in power. I want to critique powerful companies. I want to do all that stuff. So if we're going to be cynical, here's what I don't like us being cynical about is I'll bring up this idea of like, oh, email. Email is this beautiful open standard that we all benefit from. And people say, well, but really, who owns email? Gmail, right? And sure, Gmail is a big part of the market. But you know what you can't do? Is you can't create a Spotify profile not on Spotify. You can create a hey.com email address. And there's probably thousands, maybe even more than, maybe 10,000 independent email service providers in the world that will give you a unique email that is not Gmail. You can host it yourself. You can put a machine under your desk and host your own email server if you want to. I wouldn't recommend it. So sure, you can be cynical about that, but it's still an open standard. Gmail is not charging you for a stamp fee for every email you send. And I guarantee you, if they started charging me a stamp fee, I would move somewhere else. These protocols are remarkably resilient to monopolies. So sure, Gmail has most of the market. There's still a lot of Hotmail addresses out there. There's still a lot of Yahoo addresses out there. There's tons of Outlook addresses out there. Microsoft. You see the same tension of these big Goliaths, and they all want to own the market. But even with Gmail's success, they're still Microsoft. They're pulling and holding the balance of power, and independent nerds and smaller companies saying, you know what? I don't like the way Gmail does email, and I'm going to start my own email company. And you can do that. Like, those exist. And some of those independent email companies are doing quite well, you know? So the cynicism I hear about, you know, those kind of standards, I'm like, and people will say, well, I don't even like email. I'm like, email is amazing for all of its faults and all of the mess. It's actually beautiful. And the same criticisms you apply to email and spam email, I could apply it to YouTube comments. Like, I get so much bullshit YouTube comments. I could apply it to Google Analytics results. You look through like your refers and you're like, there's like 10 like spammy refers here that they haven't filtered out yet. It's everywhere, whether it's centralized or non-centralized. So I don't think open standards deserve the kind of cynicism they sometimes get. It's like, no, this is beautiful. Email's amazing. Arvid can have a list of all of his, customers and fans, and he can download it as a CSV and have it on his hard drive. Even if MailChimp decides to go take it away or ConvertKit or whatever, you get to hold on to it.
That's exactly what I did.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I did. Like, I had my list on MailChimp. They wanted to charge me a lot of money. And I said, nope, took my list, went to ConvertKit. Exactly the route I took. And there was no friction because it was impossible for that friction to exist because the standard is there, right? It was, it's a really good point. I think what you said earlier, like these systems, they generate opportunities for founders. Yeah. That's the big point here, I think. And with all the complexity of federation, and I guess email is a great example of that too, like with the spam filters and like the trustworthy domains, like that the big players are trying to push the smaller ones aside, right? Because they don't want to federate with them because it's not in their interest. But in the end, if you build a solid system based on solid protocols, you could still operate your own email server and communicate with people on Gmail. It's not a problem. You just have to understand how the technology works.
Yeah. And the nerds at Gmail, by the way, the nerds who are running those email servers, fundamentally, there's still these intrinsic values baked into these protocols. So even if Gmail is like, we're not super stoked that a lot of people are switching to hey.com, the nerds at Gmail are still going to receive emails from hey.com because the values are built in, you know? Anyway, that's probably enough on open standards, but I'm a big proponent of them. And I think we've missed, again, crypto was a distraction, especially for indie hackers on where most of the value on the web has come from. And it's been the open web. Open standards. We've all benefited from it. Every bootstrapped company has benefited from it. And we should be investing more in it as independents.
Yep. As you said, the values are built in, and they're built into the protocols, the open web. They're also built into Transistor FM, which is kind of cool to know that this is a business that started from values and then just attached them later, but came out of it. Thank you so much for being on the show today. That was a lot of insight into a very interesting industry. As a podcaster myself, I'm excited to understand it better because it's the world that I'm in and I want to be in. I want to make better too, and I'm so glad that you are on the forefront of making it better. The committee, super interesting idea, like establishing and kind of being a proponent for change for the better. That's awesome. Thank you so much for doing this, and thank you for talking to me about it. It just makes me very happy to see the journey that you've been on, like both with Transistor and before, and the building in public that you're doing, the communication that you're doing in your newsletter, on Twitter. Where do you want people to find you if they want to learn many more very interesting things?
I would love for people to sign up on my newsletter, justinjackson.ca/newsletter. I'm still on Twitter, the letter M, the letter I, Justin. I'm spending a lot more time on Mastodon. If you search MI Justin on there, you'll see me on mastodon.social. But yeah, come hang out. And I do. We have a podcast that we haven't published an episode on in a while. But if you haven't listened to our story, Build Your SaaS chronicles our whole journey from nothing to where we are today.
I'm a big fan of that podcast, and I hope there will be more episodes in the future, but no pressure. Same goes for your newsletter. It's sporadic, but whenever it appears in my inbox, it's always good.
Yeah.
Same goes for the podcast. Thank you so much for being on today.
Thanks so much for having me.
And that's it for today. Thank you for listening to The Bootstrap Founder. You can find me on Twitter at ArvidKahl, ARVIDKAHL. You'll find my books and my Twitter course there as well. If you want to support me and this show, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, get the podcast in your podcast player of choice, and leave a rating and a review by going to ratethispodcast.com/founder. Any of this will help the show. Thank you very much for listening and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.